your definition, and everybody else is going to embellish it. So, your definition of what bots is.
Semantics.
We went with, and you can chime in here, we were talking more like Bloom's evaluation, synthesis, those higher levels. So I don't-
Analysis.
Creating.
Okay,
creating.
so, so we got evaluation,
Synthesizing.
Creating something new.
that's synthesis. What else?
Anal.
That it?
Synthesis and analysis.
Analysis.
And I think connections has to go in there somewhere too, being able to connect the knowledge that you have to something else in the same discipline, or maybe even cross-discipline connections.
That's synthesis. Okay, how about y'all? What would you add to that higher order thinking?
Us?
Yeah,
We
all
said-
y'all.
We just said, it's applying prior knowledge and experience to solve a problem. Which we think kind of covers all of that, because application is like.
Okay.
All y'all.
I
What
think
would you
prior
add?
knowledge, she says something important, that is prior knowledge is an important part of higher
Okay,
thinking.
prior knowledge.
But integrated, it's not just prior knowledge, because prior knowledge is retrieval. It's prior knowledge integrated with new knowledge,
That's synthesis.
and then making connections, relationships, and telling why.
Okay? Now you started. Anna, you were with them?
Yeah, we
Oh,
did
okay,
three.
so you three.
We went we went directly probably to the Blooms, the evaluation, we talked a little bit about ambiguity that you discussed earlier, that has to be, that's within the process to allow students to do some, that there are often multiple ways of coming at solutions.
Okay?
And we also say the depth, going in deeper of the student's knowledge, depth.
Being able to justify.
What's another word for that?
Enrich.
Okay.
And is justification, do you think, being able to justify this is
Yeah,
why I
that's
think
evaluation.
what I think evaluation, okay.
Okay, and there's some conversation, which is more, how should I say, which is more difficult? If you recall, Bloom's is a taxonomy, and he, by orders of magnitude, he stacked which is the most, the least difficult to the most difficult cognitive function. And he originally put evaluation on top. A subsequent,
Review.
Visiting.
Review.
well, actually one of his former pupils says, no, we need to put the synthesis on top.
We actually have a session on training on some newer versions with Hess and Costa. And what Ben was talking about with Costa's level, they've combined knowledge and comprehension, and then application and analysis and synthesis and evaluation together. So they've combined them, but they've also sort of reordered them.
Yeah,
And these
Costa's
are
level of
the
questioning is
handouts that we
very
use, and this is Hess's that
Didn't
explains it a little bit more.
Put something out about that also a few years ago. He has a new,
Oh, he reworded it,
Yeah.
okay.
well, it's different.
Is it the level
That's the one that's
protocol?
called the depth of
Okay,
knowledge.
I'm
Is that one
surprised
done?
nobody put critical thinking up here. What happened? No critical thinking?
Oh, well, isn't that?
I think that's all.
That is
part
what
of
higher order
critical
thinking
It
is.
is higher order.
It's critical thinking.
Okay, now, please remember, we're talking about buzzwords, and one of Dr. West's pet peeves is accuracy and precision in language. So, how would you define analytical thinking versus critical thinking?
What's the difference?
That's my question.
I think of it in terms of categorizing. So you have critical thinking. Well, one way to think critically about something is to evaluate and justify what you're doing. And
Okay.
then
I put it there, sir.
another way to do critical thinking as to analyze it and make opinions about it, or, you know.
Okay, no, they're different. According to Bloom's, analysis is right here. 2 orders of magnitude more difficult is evaluation, making judgments, criticizing, critical thinking. That's according to Bloom's, even according to,
So
his-
he uses critical in terms of criticizing. I think we have.
What is evaluation? It's making judgments.
Yes,
What is
yes.
criticizing? What is critical?
Right.
It's making value judgments.
So then for me, critical also means important and highly valued. I mean, I think it's that word critical. What was the definition for critical? Sort of like Ricker. What is the definition of Ricker, really?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so my contention is that there's a reason why they're separate right here.
Yes.
And in terms of problem solving, you have to do all 3 of these. Problem solving is actually a process.
Mhm.
It's not a thinking skill. It's more of a process. It's a heuristic, step by step. What do we do? Okay, and the first step is always analysis. What is the problem? What's
What do we-
there? Take it apart.
Mhm.
See what's wrong. Then actually synthesis is coming up with a solution. So evaluation would be what needs to be there, what's missing, what else do I need to know?
We'll
Is
get
it
you-
valid? Is it not
We'll get you
valid?
copies.
Once they've done those 2 steps, then they could put things together with the prior knowledge and come up with a problem-solving skill.
Yeah, but then after evaluation, then you have to get into the application. Once you figure out the problem and how to fix it, then
You need
How
to
do you do
implement it. There you go. Okay, so higher order thinking. Why? What's the big deal about higher order thinking? Why don't we just tell them what they need to know?
Okay, I'm just gonna tell you that at my private school, my first job, the parents paid $22,000 a year for their kids to go to school there. And a parent went to complain to the head of school that I was doing problem solving in class. And why did her kid have to do that? Shouldn't math be the instruction of process until kids on their own are able to do these things?
Okay? What'd you tell them?
I didn't, she went to the head of school to tell her that.
So why even mess with that? Isn't our job just get the knowledge into their brains?
I think a lot of times what we're facing now is students don't know how to make decisions in the everyday world of just some common sense things because everything has been fed to them and given to them. Their parents have done it or whatever it may be, and that's why their parents want you to do it for them
Right.
because they're doing it. But then they make poor decisions as they grow older because
And
they've
they
never
don't know how
had
to
to.
Okay, so we're
themselves.
fighting tradition. Jen and then Mark.
So, you know, one of the things that we want our students to do, and I think every teacher wants their students to be able to think for themselves. Figure this out for yourself, because
Okay,
I'm not
and
gonna
that's
be
starting
here
to
all
be
the
an
time
issue on
telling
the
you.
STAR test. Starting to be, it hasn't
Right.
been.
But
No,
when
she's
I
right.
teach you a process and then the problem changes, you're lost. So understand and think about, you know, and then be able to do that. And it's not, when somebody teaches you a process, you have one way of thinking about it. When a child understands something conceptually, they can see it maybe from a lot of different angles. When you teach them the process, or not the process skills, but Bloom's or whatever you want to call these higher order thinking skills, they're able to look at things in a different way.
Okay, so I
That's
asked the
something that serves
question,
them.
and certainly I'm fishing. Hopefully Mark will give me the answer I'm looking for.
I don't know, but
He just
one of the reasons why I like this program is because it really helps our teachers learn the standards and teaks that the kids really need to learn. And the teaks use this language and will tell you in 5th grade they need to be at this level. You know, and we've had, I think, some conversations also of, and you made a comment earlier, 3rd graders. You know, 3rd grade teacher can say, my kids are doing 6th grade math. That's fine and dandy, but are they learning the 3rd grade material? So I think just from a very administrator point of view, you know, why do we need, one, we're held accountable in making sure that our kids are learning at those appropriate levels. I think we have to put some trust in the committees that make the standards so that it's developmentally appropriate for the kids, and that's where we have to get them. And if we get them there to that third grade standard, if it's at analysis, so that in fifth grade, it's gonna help them with that next concept that's coming up.
Well, I think the STAR test did a quantum leap in terms of separating what they need to know in this grade versus the preparation and what they have learned in other grades. The process. But
I wanna just bring up one thing. Marzano has high yield teacher strategies and he has high yield student strategies. Has anybody here done Fundamental 5? Or know what that is?
Is that like the Daily 5?
No, it's a way to collect data about your teachers, and it's 5 things that should be happening in classrooms for the best results. And one of the things that we did when we were collecting the data, and we would look at the graphs that come from the data collection, because you just walk in a room and it's a data collection thing to talk to the teacher about. Your high yield teacher strategies are about 5 times greater than your high yield student strategies. And so the way I explained it to my staff is you're doing all the work. You are up there teaching your heart out. You are working hard. You are doing so much. You are doing a lot. But guess what? The students, it's not high yield student strategies. Is there a time and a place for high yield teacher strategy? Yeah. What this program does is everything that's happening is the teacher gives the background knowledge and then as a guide on the side for the majority of the lesson. So you're having a high yield teacher practice, but then you add on the high yield student practice.
okay, so that comes back to my original question, and thank you. You get a star on your forehead.
And A for the day. Do I get a ticket? What am I gonna go
Okay,
to drawing?
there you go. The reason why we do HOTS is because it helps students remember. If we train the student to think in this way, they are gonna remember the content. When the students are physically, actively engaged, they are going to remember the content. If we just talk to them and tell them what they need to know, they're gonna remember maybe 3 or 4%.
There was a teacher years ago, I think she's Yvonne Baltier, I wonder if she still
Yes.
has this sign above her door, but she had this sign that says, I get paid to ask questions, not give answers. I get paid to make you think.
And looking at the STAR items, when they first came out in science where they were dual coded, I said, you can't do that. That's contrary to fundamental assessments, two items in this thing. But when I started looking at it, I thought, this is a great thing, because the dual coded items, those students don't understand that question if they have not done the lab or field, the hands-on activities with it.
Okay,
Those
so
questions are hard.
when we have higher order thinking, we need to make certain considerations, and we're changing the way students are thinking, we're changing the way teachers are thinking and
I cannot
teaching.
read this.
One of the
There's too
considerations
much.
is that you really can't do higher order thinking if they have nothing to think about. So they have to have some knowledge. They have to have something in there to talk about. Now, if you have to get that knowledge into them in any number of ways, but higher order thinking requires something to think about. Second thing is that typically it requires more time on the teacher's part before the lesson. Yes.
On the on Tuesday, we had the conversation of we talked about meeting the kids where they are versus teaching on that grade level. So I'm trying to make a connection to this of, if the kid doesn't have certain skills readily available, are we just spinning our wheels by trying to teach them a 5th grade concept when they're ready for a 2nd grade concept? So I'm trying to make a connection to that in that conversation that we had the other day.
And what is the answer to that? The magical word, differentiation.
Right. So, and one of the connections that I've been making throughout these 3 days is, as we're looking at higher order skills, 21st century skills, of problem solving, critical thinking, communication, all that kind of stuff. If we are doing the math science integration and the hands-on and the group work and all that kind of stuff, then we're building the communication skills, we are building the teamwork, we're building the problem solving. And kids have to have community experiences, small group experiences, over and over and over and over. They have to be able to practice it all the time, because that's how we build the social emotional skills. Those are caught way more than they're taught, I think. I think when you start teaching them directly, like you do that for the behavior kids, you're like, dude, you cannot do that, you have to do this. But the rest of it is like, they watch the grown-ups, they watch their other peers, all that stuff. And in order to problem solve and evaluate and make decisions, you have to include the emotional piece. I mean, you cannot make a decision without the emotions coming into play.
What emotion do we want? Enjoyment, fun,
Well, for learning,
anticipation,
that's nice,
excitement.
yes.
Okay,
You can also
so-
have, you could learn by disappointment and
Frustration.
humiliation and frustration.
But it comes from themselves, not from us. Yeah, okay. So,
Yes, hopefully we're not doing that.
students,
Yeah.
students are not trained to do this, they don't know how to do it typically. Several years ago, I was involved in a program, pre-freshman engineering program, and we had written a grant to Ford Motor Company, and they have a wonderful curriculum, you should check it out, Ford PAS, P-A-S. But anyway, that curriculum is very much inquiry-based and very much integrated, math, science, and business. And I brought in 5 students from 5 different schools, no, from 3 different school districts, and we had 30 kids. And we gave them one of these problem-solving, inquiry lessons the first week. They didn't know what to do. They had no clue what to do. They just sat there. We had them in, groups of 4 or 5 kids, and we said, okay, you need to design a soda bottle using, these parameters. You want the cheapest one, you want the most value, you want whatever. And they didn't have a clue. And it was a 6-week program, and it was amazing to see after the first week of them not knowing what to do, and then the 2 teachers that we had hired to help them, they, held their hand, showed them how to do it, said, oh, okay, well, you should think about this, and what about that? And then at the end of 6 weeks, we gave them a totally open test, kind of like what I did to y'all, to come up with the strongest plastic, come up with tests on how to find out what's the strongest plastic and strongest metal. And you wouldn't believe the incredible processes that they came up with to determine what was the strongest metal. And they had no, how should I say, they were given some, some basic information about different types of plastic, different types of metal, but they weren't given any information about tests. And they went out and found the tensile strength, they found, they created their own tests, bending and stretching and chemical, and it was amazing. But it can happen, the first time it's not gonna be easy, kids are gonna just sit there, they don't know what to do.
Well, and that's the group, the teachers will say, I'm doing group work. No, you just have 4 individuals sitting at the table.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to work as a group, and I think the elementary principals know with guided reading, when you want to have an effective guided reading model in your classroom, you spend a lot of time training students. Science teachers are actually the experts of training kids how to get their materials and get them out, and because they have 45 minutes to boom boom, so.
Okay, the other thing, they must have a high level of trust, and in this consideration right here, think about your teachers and PLCs. What's different?
The students must have a high level of trust, or the teachers?
No, students have to trust each other.
The teachers have to
Do
trust
any
that
of these
this is
things
gonna
right
work.
here, do they not apply to teachers too?
Yes,
We're gonna be revisiting that in
on
a
that
second.
math community, that's part of the math.
Okay, some of the results, whoops, just gonna go over those real quick. In the long run, even though it takes more preparation, more effort on the teacher's part, higher order thinking means more permanent memory. More of that information gets pushed into long-term memory because they have the capacity to associate it with an activity, with a real live hands-on event. It establishes patterns of thought or habits of mind, and it makes teaching and learning a lot more enjoyable. I need to share real quickly a brain-based research that happened. If you're familiar with London, the city grew organically. There was no master plan, and so you have streets that start and stop and turn and then start up again, and then it's a rat's nest of streets. And you have buses that follow certain routes, and then you have taxi drivers. And some ingenious researcher said, well, I wonder what the difference between taxi drivers and buses are, or bus drivers were. And so they actually put them in an MRI and measured their brain. What do you think the results were?
Bigger
Talk with your
brain.
elbow partner.
Obviously bigger brain capacity for the cats.
Sure.
They have a variety of things, they've got so many other things they have to learn.
Well, they can veer off their path too, so if there's a bet, they can change some of the.
That's the biggest part, that's the biggest element.
Well,
They have to learn. They constantly have to learn.
Watch, it's gonna be up.
It's like, what do you mean, what's the entrance? She goes, lady,
Yeah.
there's no way. I'm
Okay,
gonna
so,
have every place.
A bus driver would need to have a tremendous amount of knowledge about the route that they're going to take, right? What about a taxi driver? They'd have to know all of it. Okay, now according to Kane and many other brain researchers, there's two types of memory. There's a locale memory, and then there is a taxon memory. The locale memory, just think, what were you doing September 11th? What were you doing, 2001?
Teaching.
Okay, think about that situation. Think about what you remember. You probably, if you're like me, you have a vivid memory of colors, people. You could count the number of people that were there. You could, you know exactly where you were standing.